I'm delighted to welcome today Stephanie Cyr from San Francisco, who is an attorney and you specialize in violence prevention. So welcome, Stephanie.
Oh, thank you for having me. Very happy to be here.
Most welcome. I've never come across an attorney who specializes in violence prevention. So explain yourself, please.
Well, it's an interesting story. I started out practicing law, and my hobby on the side to release tension and stress was martial arts. So I was in law school by day, and at night I was learning how to physically spar or fight in the evening, and learned self-defense in those martial arts classes. And over time, the short of it is those two interests flipped. The law went on the back burner, and the martial arts and then the self-defense came forward. And that is basically because of personal experiences. I would go into the law office after I graduated, and practicing law, thinking life was fine. And now what is very clear, I was being assaulted. It was one very specific incident, sexually assaulted by someone who was superior to me, and I didn't know how to handle it. I did the best I could, took his hands off me, walked out of the office, and waited to get fired. And this was 3 decades ago. And there was a moment of thinking, can I go to a supervisor? Can I go to HR? No, they would just let me go. I was the lowest person on the totem pole. That night, go into the gym, and where I'm supposed to be learning self-defense, I'm taken out on the mat, as we say, but yet I didn't keep myself safe. But the light bulb didn't go on then. Years later, I came to San Francisco, and I was assisting teaching martial arts at a university, and it was the students, and I credit the students completely for my light bulb moment. I was working under Grand Master, very well regarded. He had his own form of self-defense, been written up in Black Belt magazine, which is quite huge here, prestigious here in the States, for this type of self-defense. And on the side, students would come up to me and say, hey, that move's not working for me. And it was one student, happened to be a male student, who came up to me and said, can I talk to you? And told me about how he had been assaulted the weekend before. This is before mandated reporting. I wasn't required to report it. And he said, what can I do to stay safe? And that's when it kind of clicked. You know what? We're learning these moves that are supposed to be keeping us safe, and they're not. So from there, I started doing my research. So more of the practicing law went on the back burner, and what came forward was researching what is self-defense and what is effective self-defense, and how can we make a difference. So
are you still a practicing attorney today?
I am, but just on my own. I'm not affiliated with any firm or org.
So what kind of cases do you take on?
I'm not a trial lawyer. It's transactional contract law.
Okay. So how did the effective self-defense manifest then? Because as you say, there's self-defense. You see people in a boxing ring or doing the judo thing and flinging themselves around, and it looks very elegant and very controlled. But how does that translate into a real world situation?
If I'm going to be blunt, it doesn't. I mean, and I can say that firsthand. I competed. I was in the ring. There were rules. There's no rules on the street. There's no rules in your home when you are assaulted. And that's where there was the disconnect. So what I'm part of, and what I teach, is referred to as empowerment self-defense. It's the only evidence-based form of self-defense out there, where there's been numerous studies done that taking courses in it can actually reduce the risk of being assaulted. And there's no big, so here it is. It's not just physical moves. You learn mental and verbal strategies. you learn in that moment what you see in the ring. I mean, those are athletes, and that's beautiful. And I love martial arts. I'm a martial arts geek, still practicing. But you do learn how to use your body physically to stay safe, but mental and verbal strategies are huge. And that is the difference. I find actually one of the hardest things for students to learn is using their voice. Mm. The term has started. I have my new fresh group of university students, and that is, they will kick or punch a pad or strike a pad. We're not punching, but using their voice is hard. And we've just begun. They're going to learn boundary setting. They're going to learn all different ways to use their voice. So,
do you do this in person or at? Oh, my system is going wonky. Do you do this in person or online or both?
Both. And that's because of COVID. I never thought I'd do it online. And right in midterm, 6 weeks in of a university class, we had to switch online. And what that brought out was, well, first of all, the realization I could reach people ever much further than just the Bay Area or wherever I go. I travel around the United States and teach in person. But also what came out were different issues. So my class that had been in person, suddenly we flip online and we started talking about violence in the workplace. Mm. And let me even back up a moment here. Also in empowerment self-defense, that's the definition of violence. Violence is on a spectrum where this is not just assault. We're talking everyday harassment, microaggressions, all the way up through to violent assault.
It's really quite extreme, isn't it? I've been the victim of various things over the years, and as you mentioned, your first situation was 3 decades ago, and life was different then. It was very, very different. In my case, it was more than 3 decades ago, but life was different, and you had to just look after yourself, or get the hell out of there, and that right. That's the way it was. But I think to an extent, things have almost gone the other way now, to where somebody breaks a fingernail and they have a day off work because they can't cope with it. So there's lots of bits in between and so on. But it's like everything, isn't it? There needs to be a balance, and how you conduct yourself ethically, morally, with integrity and so on. I think it's really important. But where are the lines? Are there any rules now? Are there any ground rules for this kind of thing in the workplace?
It's interesting you say that. In my head, I picture a pendulum. We swung one way, yeah. Now we've swung the other way. So in the workplace, and you've just stated it in point, it's treating each other with respect, and treating your role there with respect. And a lot of time going in the workplace, I'm talking to people about managing their adrenal stress response to issues, whether you said breaking your fingernail, but a lot of times they feel they were slighted. They feel something's happening. They can't quite articulate it. And a big part of empowerment self-defense is becoming self-aware, aware of yourself, how you react to things. And frankly, it's once you start working with people with managing that, I found when I'm right there I think of it as on the ground working with people, they're not calling out because of that fingernail. They really, people, first of all, want to gather, want to be connecting again, whether it's online, they'd rather be in person, I'm finding, and they want to make it work. So it's more, when I'm called in, there's an assessment done of the workplace, there's an issue, and there's usually, it's becoming self-aware, even the perpetrator. Oh, you think it's funny making those jokes? I think we need some education here, but it's treating everyone with compassion, including that person. And let's start with education of treating each other with respect.
Absolutely. It also feeds into the work that I do with health and well-being. So over the years, I've become a specialist in the DISC model of behavioural profiling, and a lot of the situations where bullying and harassment and so on is perceived, it's simply because you have a strong personality style and a more vulnerable personality style, and the vulnerable person sees that they're being harassed and bullied, whereas the stronger person has no idea that their behaviour is perceived like that. So as you say, it's education. And when you're informed about your own behaviours, and the difference between yourself and other people, then you can then manage yourself, but then help to manage that relationship as well.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with DISC. I also work with other orgs. So I work with one called PAVE Prevention. I'm a senior facilitator for going into certain workplaces. And before we went for one project, which was fascinating, they asked all of us, all the trainers, to take the DISC. Big fan of DISC. Fascinating. I knew Myers-Briggs. I wasn't familiar with DISC. And then we had all the trainees take the DISC and learn definitely, and exactly what you just said, that D, somebody who is just wants to get it done, and maybe they're a little abrupt in their leadership style, learns about who they're working with, someone, and that's, it's becoming self-aware. And that I'm also a health coach, certified health coach. So I believe this is a health issue. I mean, number one, safety, fundamental right for all. Work with another org, ESD Global, that has contracts with UN Women, and we talk about it as it's a human right. A lot of people kind of shy away from talking about self-defense, so I also want to bring attention to it being a health issue as well. It affects your health. So back to the workplace, it's affecting people's health. They're stressed. They don't want to come into work. They feel someone, someone is threatening them. And threat can come in many different ways. It could be your boss asking you to do extra work outside your responsibilities. And you don't know how to say no. You don't know how to put up the boundaries. And what happens? You start not going into work. You're absent. And then it comes down to money. There's a cost. There's a human cost. There's a monetary cost for the business.
Yeah, absolutely. And I first got trained in DISC over 25 years ago, and I first started volunteering in schools because had I understood my behavioural style early on, I probably would have got on better, quicker, whatever the words are, sooner. So I still volunteer with supporting schools, particularly the kids who are at risk of being thrown out of school, because very, very often, 99% of the time, they are my profile. I hated school, couldn't wait to get the hell out of there, and I left I was barely 16 and I left school, and years later, I made up for it because I ended up being with a master's degree and chief executive of several law firms. So it all comes around, when the time is right, it comes around. But people need challenges. They need it in the right proportions. So they need that. We all have different styles of relaxing, of being challenged, of our stress limitations and so on. So I've now got my own DISC behavioural profiling tool on the back end of my website that I use with clients with my health mentoring. So that's an integral part of what I do. And I can tell somebody's DISC behavioural profile if they're at burnout, if they've exceeded their capability of being adaptable. And I had a client only yesterday who basically it was clear as clear that she's at burnout. Now she knows that she couldn't put her finger on it. She knew things weren't right and she was in overwhelm, and she was everybody else, like you say, not knowing how to say no, not knowing where the boundaries are, and as a result she's burnt out. So she's now taken steps to address, but it's the behavior. So our own behaviors can help us, but they can also get in the way as well. So it's fascinating.
Absolutely. I'd love to talk to you about DISC another time. So I was two things. Number one, in working with this one group, it was fascinating for me. It's always fascinating to see people come into their own or realize themselves. This one young woman on the DISC, she had underlying strong leadership skills, and this just filled her to actually see it on paper. And by the end of the 6 weeks, she was taking a leadership role with the group in a different way, in a quiet way, in a collaborative way. She was an influencer.
Yes, I identify with that. So everybody can lead, anybody can lead, but they'll do it in different ways. So some people will do it through the rules, some people will do it through their personality, some people will do it through, you know, being dictatorial. Lots of different ways, aren't there?
Right, correct. Anyway, so that's in the workplace. That's where I found it. But I also, being on a college campus, been on a college campus for years, I haven't seen the needle move on the statistics for assaults the way we would all hope it would. And it took a lot, but that's also why I brought empowerment self-defense to a university campus, and trying to make a difference there. Actually trying to bring it right now, it's in the process of trying to bring it as a minor program. Students receive credits for taking my class, but I'd like them to receive a minor in empowerment self-defense so they can go out and teach it, whether it's a side hobby as it started for me, or it becomes something more than that. But there needs to be cultural change, certainly on our campuses. So
you mentioned earlier on about mental and verbal violence in the workplace and violence in the home. It's not just the workplaces, it's in the home, it's among peers, it's everywhere. If your radar's up to it, you can see it everywhere. People being passive aggressive, whether they realize it or not. People's behavior is perceived in so many different ways. So give some examples of the what people can do about their voice. You were saying about your students using their voice. Right.
So I really like that you said radar up, because it is about listening to yourself, your intuition. We can use the more obvious example, as I said, someone making a joke in a meeting, and using your voice. You can use it in different ways, depends on your personality and how confident you are to perhaps in that moment say, you know, I really didn't appreciate that comment. It's for a lot of times when I'm talking to a student or I'm in the workplace, I'll have people say, I cannot do that. I cannot do that. Well, guess what? But afterwards, then use your voice, and depending how you feel, either talk to the person directly and tell them you didn't appreciate it and why, and how you took their comment, how it affected you. You always talk about the behavior, by the way, not the person. You don't, very important, you don't ever say, you know, you're a jerk because you made that comment. You say those words, the comment, you know, about my hair, I did not appreciate. And a lot of times people don't realize what they're saying. They think, in that example, they just think they're funny, or they're, it's no big deal, and they don't realize that. So you could educate them and give them a chance to apologize and move forward. If you're not comfortable with that, you can go to HR, you go to, or your whoever is the next person above you in your org that you can talk to. Or if you're not comfortable with that, you can talk to your friend, a colleague in the office, or someone else who's in the room, and have a check. Like, hey, am I being sensitive? Or did you notice that comment that really rubbed me the wrong way? And have a check-in. It's really, really good to have somebody you can talk to in your office. Or another way, using your voice. Document. You can document the email and keep a folder. You can document an email and send it to someone if you need to have that distance. People process information differently. So those are ways you can use your voice with that type of situation where it's a slight, which, as I said before, it can turn into something much larger, and you should address at a certain level. So just telling people, it's making people aware of the options and literally giving them permission to do that. And like I said, going back to learning about yourself, okay, I need to write it down and sit with it for a while before I take action, versus someone else is marching right in there and going to say something about it. So,
yeah,
absolutely.
We all deal with things differently. What we give out and what we receive as well, and things are perceived differently. Do you find that multi-generational differences? So my generation, the comedy that I grew up with, you know, I couldn't. But my first husband sends me WhatsApp memes almost daily, and there's no way on this earth that I could share them in this day and age. But it's the humor that we grew up with. So does that have an impact, do you think?
Oh my goodness, absolutely. You're making me laugh because if I watch a movie with my children from my era, we all just sit there at the jokes of, oh my gosh, that you could never have that now in a show. I definitely, it's interesting too. I've seen that over the years. I first stepped on the mat at this particular university in 2006, and I was just telling my students the other day how things have changed. But that's something else. That's another topic. There's definitely been a change of the way we speak to each other, what jokes are appropriate and what is not. Yes. But I want to emphasize that it's not always from a place to harm. The intention, you look at action and intention. So if you feel it harmed you or threatened you, there's different ways to address it. It's very important for a person to address it for themselves so that they can move forward. And I was talking about just a joke as an insult, but even in sexual assaults, it's very important to feel you can start taking control back and with a situation. So like I said, literally even writing it in a journal, or I like to say document. And if you write yourself an email or a note and you put it in a folder, call the folder something else. Mm-hmm. Just that we can go down that road too. Just call the folder something else, but it's very good for you personally to know that you're handling. This is the first step, or the step you can take to handle a situation. But no, the joke, it has changed what is tolerated. What's interesting to me though, especially through the past decade, whatever's going on in the news and media, I cannot tell you how refreshing it was to step on a mat and be with students in person, with young people, and that in person, they just want to get along. They just want to move forward and understand each other. And I'm at a university with a lot of students, their first generation, the first person in their family to go to school. We have a great ethnic mix on our campus. It's not perfect, but we do. And it's fantastic in that small space with max like 30 students. Everyone's starting to have conversations and talk. So especially if something was in the media. So there's been change where you might think like less tolerant for some jokes, or jokes have changed, but there's also people, okay, they're understanding each other more, and they really do want to get along. They want to live peacefully and thrive. So
absolutely. You mentioned about the voice, but it's the tone as well that we use. So sometimes a lot of people will say something, but it might come out in the wrong tone, but the intention is well meant. So the tone and the body language and the physical way people hold themselves, it's all part of the same puzzle, isn't it?
It absolutely so important. One of the first things on first day we talk about is body language and how you hold yourself, how the world is perceiving you. But yes, in tone of the voice, and yes, the way you hold yourself, the way you deliver it, your eye contact. Maybe you're staring right at that one person when you're making that joke in the room, in the committee. And it's very important. And it's like I said, you learn how to read people, and you learn that it's important how you hold yourself too, with that confidence. I can't emphasize that enough. If anything, people do learn physical skills in empowerment self-defense, no question. But I like to tell the students at the very end of a course, after they've been with me for a while and they've built up some strength, the most important thing of them building their physical strength is they hold themselves differently. They hold themselves erect and with more confidence, and they're perceived differently in the world.
Breathing and overall health and well-being, the self-esteem, the whole bit.
Well, it's actually a colleague of mine did a study. I'm so excited. We finally have a study on this about how it increases people's self-esteem and their confidence. And just knowing you have some control here. You can't control this violence or what other people do. That's the responsibility of the perpetrator. Full stop. but you can control how you respond to it. And just knowing that, and then knowing you have options, is very empowering.
Mm,
And I wanted to bring up something that we touched on. Sorry to interrupt. When I was talking about people in the office, there's also the idea of the bystander. If
right.
I'm in that room and that joke has occurred, I have options too. I could say something right in the moment. I could say something to the person who said the joke afterwards. Very powerful that people don't tend to forget. I can walk up to the person who it seemed it was directed at and say, "Oh, how you doing? How are you doing? Are you okay?" Very powerful to be seen if you've been the target of harm. A greater example is I have a lot of students who are on the public transportation, and somebody targets them on the bus and starts screaming and yelling at them and then walks away. If you just go over, sit down next to them and say, "I saw that, that wasn't okay. Are you okay?" That's very extremely helpful for that person to know that they were seen and it wasn't okay by someone else.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been reminded as we've been talking about an incident I had. I was collecting something from some flowers and fruit for a friend who was in hospital, and I came out of the shop armed with all these, flowers and fruit and what have we. And there was a fight that had started across the road, and it was a young man and an older man, and they were literally, it was like something out of a movie. You get the rolling, I can't think what they call it in cowboy movies. You get this rolling stuff that kind of goes down the street.
Tumbleweed.
Yeah. So it was really a proper tumbleweed moment. Everybody had stopped, the traffic had stopped, and these two were having a real full-on serious fight. So I put I was in the police for a short while, so I'm not frightened of going up and asking if anybody wants any help. And I just heard myself. And I was like an old school mom, and I shouted. I said, "What do you think you're doing? How dare you?" And they both looked up in such shock, and they stood up, brushed themselves down, and off they went. And everybody, and I got a round of applause. I just thought, how dare they? But nobody was doing anything. And here I was, and I think I was probably only in my I don't know, maybe early 30s or something. Using my voice to tell these people off, but it was a shock. The shock of them being, brought to bear, sort of thing.
But they say behaviorally, they study this. They need that. You did it. You disrupted the emotions and that moment, and brought them both back. And that's fantastic. And that goes to your personality, right? And that you could, that was your reaction to. I've done that. I've distracted. They call it. Without thinking, I will leap in, and I did this one time. I'm a relatively small person, so I think that also flustered two people having an argument. It was a male and a female. And by the way, male and female, you're having an argument. Some people default to think, oh, they know each other. I don't want to get involved. So you always, if you're the target, get loud with your voice and say, "I don't know you. Get away from me." Literally, even if it's someone you're intimate with, because you want people to take action or the very least call. Anyway, I saw two people arguing, and I just leapt in, acting like I was just all flustered and as if I knew the woman, and said, "Oh my gosh, I've been looking all over for you. Where have you been?" They both stopped. She doesn't know me from anything. And I took her arm because it was getting violent. And I walked her away quickly before there could be anything said. And it's always keep walking till you're somewhere safe. And she didn't have to, full story, she didn't even say anything to me for a while. I think she was a bit in shock. And then it was a very quiet thank you. And didn't give me any information. So to this day, maybe they did know each other, maybe they were partners, but I had to break it. Right. So that's one thing that people can do who witness violence in public. It also harms everyone who witnesses it.
Yes.
Probably a lot of people kept thinking about it for the rest of the day. And we don't talk about that. We just talk about in that moment and let's move on. Well, you just witnessed something violent. My students on the public transportation were saying, having witnessed an incident, they changed their route. It became more inconvenient for them, but they didn't want to be on that same route. They didn't want it to happen to them.
Yeah, and it's, as you say, it's the strength of the bystander. The bystander in my view, has a moral obligation to do something, even if they don't have the strength of character to do what you and I did. Maybe they could report it or take a photograph or something. There's something people can do rather than walk away and basically put their head in shame.
They can always do something, and I said at least get away from the situation where you feel safe, and then make that call. And especially where I am, people say, doesn't do anything. The police won't come. Make the call. It's on record. Yeah. They get deluged with calls from this one area. It helps. There will be a response. Or get off. And if you see someone who can help, for instance, I keep going back to public transportation. Sometimes there's places you can go to get help or try and get someone. So there's always something you can do. You don't have to throw yourself into the situation. A lot of times, though, exactly what you did, shouting out in that moment, stop it in its tracks. You don't have to physically leap like I did. I'm a physical person. You can stop what's happening. So
I had another incident. So I was in a pub with some friends, and there was a man at the bar who was really depressed, and he was threatening all kinds of violent things, and he was getting really agitated, and it wasn't a happy situation. And I just went over to him, and I just started talking to him very calmly, very quietly, and I managed to get him out of the pub and walked into the train station. And then when I came back, I got a round of applause and free drinks from my friends all night, because apparently he was known for being a troublemaker. I had no idea. It was my first time there. So I just followed my intuition. And that's what a lot of people are out of touch with their intuition. They don't know themselves. They don't know what they're capable of. And we don't know how strong we are till we're tested, do we?
Right. And you just said it. A lot of people are out of touch with their intuition. And frankly, I mean, we've been raised to not listen to it. And you're supposed to be polite. It's considered rude if you tell someone to stop who's violating your boundary. We're told, men also are emotionally immature. They're not responsible, for their emotions, i.e., and that's not true either. So people are not listening to themselves. And that I will literally have somebody throw a strike through a pad with so much power. I know they could knock someone out with it, as they're telling me, I'm not strong. I can't do this. I'm like, do you feel it? Do you feel the power inside you yet? But the statistic in the States is that up to 70% of assaults could be avoided if people would just listen to that gut instinct that something's wrong here. And then we do go over that, like how to identify certain behavior that could be someone targeting you. And in bars, that stranger starting to talk to you in a bar, literally body language, getting closer to you. They will see if they can touch you. And this doesn't feel right.
Walking down the street, if you're walking with confidence, with your head held high, striding out, in a purposeful way rather than dilly-dallying and looking all forlorn and a bit pathetic. That's also it's either a target or it's don't come near me because I know what I'm doing sort of thing, isn't it? The body language again.
It's the body language, and that's a lot of studies have been done about that. It's your gait too. You swing your arms with it. Anyone who has an irregular gait, that's suddenly you get targeted for that. Certainly don't look down, which is hard with a phone. Keep your gaze up. And I tell my students too, someone approaches you on the street, they want to ask you a question, they're posing as a police officer, you keep walking. And that's very hard to do. People want to stop. They want to tell someone the time. They want to, you're in violation of something. You keep walking. You put something between you and them. Like say you have you're walking down the sidewalk and they start following you. I have walked into the street. You put a parked car. Parked cars are a brilliant barrier between you and them. You're walking out in the street, you walk against traffic to get the attention of the cars coming towards you if you need it on the street. But that's people looking for a target. They definitely read your body language.
Absolutely. Pop in a shop, pop in a crowded place.
Oh, absolutely. You're hitting all the points for me here. I tell people, if you have a regular route, then get to know the shopkeepers on your route. They're more likely, and even frankly, if you don't know them, you're being followed or you're being threatened, you go walk right into that shop with confidence. You go right behind that counter. I had a 16-year-old drop behind a counter of a bakery to hide, and the fellow came right in the shop looking for her too. But you get to know the people, as soon as you're a person to them, it makes a difference. I had a young lady in New York City just a few months ago who was walking home to her apartment, literally always walked the same route, always stopped and knew people in the restaurants nearby, and it was getting dark. And suddenly the hostess of a restaurant came out, and and I was told, literally grabbed her arm and yanked her into the restaurant, turned her around, and in moments it's hard, no one's speaking, turned her around. And the man with the hoodie, all in black, was literally right up behind, turned and looked at her, which is, she told me, like, she felt it all through her body, and then he took off. So she was that close to having somebody assault her. And thankfully, this hostess pulled her into the restaurant, and they called the police.
Yeah, very good. Very good. So how do people get hold of you, Stephanie?
You can find me on different ways on my website, strengthwithinselfdefense.com. And I'm also on Instagram. So on Instagram, I during COVID hits, I wasn't on there. My students said, okay, we are stuck at home. Can you please put up some things? So Instagram, I think, is kind of fun because it's more than just doing some physical moves and joking around, but I'm at Strength Within Self-Defense up there, and people DM me all the time. I hold workshops on whatever topics related to personal safety that people would like. So people can reach out and find me. I will respond, highly responsive. And if I don't think I'm the right person, by the way, I also really, I think it's very important. I recommend people elsewhere.
Cool. And the spelling of your name for those listening on podcasts is Stephanie Cyr, Cyr.
Yes.
Cool. And yeah, Instagram, I call it Instagranny because I am a granny, and I haven't quite got my head around it, but I'm sure one day I'll get there. But thank you so much, Stephanie, for your help today. What's the time difference, by the way? I've got, where I am in Portugal, I've got just after 5 o'clock. What time have you got there?
It is 9 a.m. in beautiful sunny California.
All right. Well, that's a shame, because I was rather hoping you might be able to speak at one of the groups I run, but the time factor is not right. It's 11 o'clock in the morning, UK time, but that would be in the middle of the night for you, so that's not going to work.
Elaine, we can make it happen some other way. I would love to. I would love to. Cool. And I'll be in Europe in April.
Oh, whereabouts?
London.
Okay. Right. So at the moment, I can't imagine me ever going back to England. I really just can't imagine it, but who knows? Never say never. Lovely. Right.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt. I was just saying I would then be closer. I'd be in your time zone then too, as well.
Oh, I see. Yes, of course. Yeah, that's true. Oh, yes. Well, there we go. Maybe that's how we can make it happen. Yeah, we'll talk off camera.
Okay. Thank you.
Fabulous. Stephanie Cyr, attorney and empowerment self-defense expert. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.